good.
Okay.
All right. So in comparison to John's car, you'll see that these plastic covered relays, Gerald's obviously had to replace a bunch of them because they do go bad fairly frequently. This is an early car, a pre-20,000 series car. You'll notice that the plenum looks a lot different. The cold start valve is directed into the plenum. It's quite a bit different looking car than John's car. As far as Corniches go, most of the Corniche 2s were of the 20,000 or later series, but some of the real early ones still had this early setup. So if you think you're buying a Corniche 2 and you're getting the later style fuel injection setup, you're not. A lot of the 86s were considered Corniche 2s, and some of the early 87s still was running this earlier type of fuel injection system.
I broke that connector last week. I got another one on order.
Okay.
It fits in here.
Adult valve.
Yeah. And I pulled it out to change out the thermostat. But anyway,
So a quick question back on the fuel injection. The California shadows that have the very last year's shadows from California, do they have the same system as this one? Okay. And how is that system? Is it good?
It's good. I mean, they never made a terrible induction and fuel injection system. It's just the 20,000 series cars were a little more peppy and a little less maintenance than these earlier cars. It's still the same idea. It's a CIS, launch injection system, some good improvements on it.
So Gerard, which connection is this?
it's on the diverter valve.
Oh, the diverter valve?
Is that the front?
I call them gulp
The
valves.
gulp valve.
Gulp valve?
GULP. All right, so looking at Gerald's pumps, the rear pump looks to be pretty good. Looking at his front pump, it looks like it's starting to leak a little bit, so he might want to get in there at some point and do his front brake pump anyway. It looks like he's re-cored his radiator. He has some tears on his insulation pads. I don't know when these were replaced last, but these one-way valves for the air injection system, the diaphragms in there can burn up and go bad. It's got a constant feed of exhaust gas on them all the time, and eventually they just give up. They're a service item just like a spark plug, so you should replace them. If you don't replace them and you do leave them to chance, what can happen is the exhaust gas will penetrate the diaphragm, and the exhaust gas will start working on this rubber and plastic, and hot exhaust gas on plastic doesn't work too well. Eventually, and I have seen cars catch on fire because those weren't replaced. It starts the rubber on fire, starts the hood insulation on fire, starts other plastic on fire, and it makes a big mess. So these check valves need to be replaced. I think by the time the Spur cars came out, they were black. On the shadows, they were like a gold cadmium color. If you still got a gold cadmium color on your shadow, they're really old, so you need to get them off of there. Gerald's still got the quart valve cover gaskets on his car. They've got a little bit of a leak. It's nothing too crazy.
Now, I have the new neoprene gaskets in the trunk with the risers for the spacers. But from what I understood, I would have to remove this fuel injection system to get to these valve covers on this car.
You would.
Okay, so if one day you could sit down with a beer and tell me about all the things I should know before I should.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, you need to know 20 years of mechanical experience.
I read the entire book in the Bosch K-Jectronic. I learned every component on the thing, but I've already forgotten it. But there's going to be some lessons learned, like this one.
Yeah, it's, actually the Jetronic, they use them on Mercedes. The Mercedes
BMW.
system is well, not BMW. They used more of a solenoid type injector. This is called CIS. It's a continual injection system. It's always squirting gas. And this is all mechanical. The fuel injector is all mechanical. It's all pressure driven. there's a piston in here that gets moved by the air plate moving as Gerald accelerates, and it puts more or less fuel pressure to the injectors. This is the most finely machined part in the whole car. And what can happen with them, especially with the ethanol gas, if they sit for long periods of time, the ethanol gas can eat at that piston, and Gerald will have problems starting it when it's hot, starting it when it's cold. It will allow the fuel pressure to bleed past the piston. One of the things we used to do, especially on Mercedes cars that had fuel injection problems, was push down on the air plate and look at the piston at the same time, and quite often you can see gas shooting past the piston. These are rebuildable. There are companies out there that do rebuild them, fortunately.
One of the things that I recall was if the car backfires through the intake, it can damage that plate and cause all kinds of problems too.
When they try and start up too lean for any purpose, all cars, not just these ones, can backfire through the intake, and yes, it can cause that plate to go out of adjustment. And the adjustment on the plate is basically done with a feeler gauge, but it has to be very precise. And it's very hard to get them set up as good as the factory has them set up. So all Gerald's belts look fairly new and good. He spent a lot of money putting the right hoses on there. We see the right clamps. See what his cork looks like here. The cork's pretty good. That's something I looked at on your car. Yours needs to be replaced. It's pretty swollen and bad. This cork looks okay. Another thing on these early CIS cars, the fuel injectors, as with most cars, are sealed up by O-rings. The O-rings in these cars can get pretty dried out and go harder than Chinese arithmetic. And they allow an air leak, and so at times you can have a higher idle than normal, a lower idle than normal. So maybe when Gerald's doing his valve cover gaskets, he's probably going to want to pull his fuel injectors and replace those seals at the same time. He does have some leakage up around his reservoir here. There's no gasket on these, but they do use like an RTV type sealant. You can see it poking out here. So Gerald's probably going to want to pull this apart and service it. Suck all the old mineral oil out, get some rags in there and clean them out really good, and then put it back together with some RTV sealant. You can see it's actually leaking down here to the point where you can see a trail of mineral oil underneath.
Well, I just replaced those hoses a week ago. So these are both new hoses. These reservoir hoses.
I don't see it coming from a hose, Gerald. I think it's
coming from my connector. I may not have tightened it enough, or is it?
I think it's coming from the top.
Okay.
You know, it sloshes around.
Yeah.
All right. Any questions while we're here, or can we go up? Okay, we're gonna go up.
Never
Yeah. The Corniche left the lead, but I don't know. It's been good this car. Take a look. It looks like power steering. All right. So starting on Gerald's car, he's got some funny looking condom things over his bleed valves here. What are those, Gerald?
Those are the covers that I have because you can't buy bleed nipple covers.
Yeah.
They're
you only get
outrageous.
them in the kits.
Yeah. Tried to buy them, so I just used what I had.
It looks like you might have a little leak from this junction block right here. You might take a wrench and see if you can tighten it up before we put it down. Either that or you just didn't get it wiped off good enough. I don't know.
I thought I did, so I may not have tightened it when I bled it. You know,
Okay.
put a wrench on it.
All right. All right. Gerald's Rams look pretty good. His brake pads look good.
Now, what are you looking at on the brake pads to determine just how much
lining you have left? You've got plenty of lining left.
Like a nickel, is that the minimum, or a dime? What would you call the minimum?
Probably about 4 millimeters or so. It's time to do them. You don't want to leave them too long. You know, the thing about the lining is the lining will hold a lot of heat. So if you let them go real low, and you're using your brakes, obviously, it heats up quicker. It can put hot spots on your rotor. So you don't want to, just say, oh, I'll just wait till they wear out. You don't want to wait till they wear out for a couple of reasons. You don't want them to forget about them and go metal to metal. And, you don't want them to put hot spots on your rotor. It looks like you've had something leaking. Is that just from when you bled it? Bleeding it? Okay. This guy looks like it's a candidate for a breather to me. You can see oil leaking from numerous places like the pinion seal, a little bit of weepage from the side seals. It could be that Gerald's got a blocked up breather. You actually have to drop the diffs on these cars to get them.
That was my next question. How do I get that? I brought a borescope, so you can show me that.
Yeah.
But drop the diff makes
Right at
more
the
sense
very
than
top
anything.
central, but it's 1 1/8 inch, but you usually have to drop the diff to get it. But that's good. It gives you a chance to clean the diff up real good and put it all back in, make it look all nice and fresh. You get a chance to drop it.
I think that's like a 200-pound differential.
Yeah.
I drop on my chest, I'd be there the rest of the day.
So this is an earlier height control setup you'll see either side, and you can see what I mean about how complicated this setup is compared to John's car with just one. And this again is a pre-20,000 series car. So it's just 2 height control valves versus 1, and so twice the danger of something leaking and twice the repair if something goes wrong. But nonetheless, just as effective. And it's a Rolls-Royce system. It's well set up, and well engineered. So. Looks like he's got a fluid leak from up front that might be spraying back a bit. Gerald's already done all his brake hoses. Is that how they come now with these funny sleeves on them?
Yeah, I think that's supposed to be green.
Yeah. It looks like 363. I know it's not though. This nice original exhaust setup. It's still all correct. All the hangers are in the right places. I don't see any leaks. Okay, this is where his oil leak's coming from. He's got a leak at his output shaft seal on the back of his transmission. That should be done. It looks like he's got a little bit of a leak from the servo cover, maybe a leak from his transmission pan also, and the modulator valve. So at some point he's going to want to wash off this transmission really good and take it for a drive to try and pinpoint exactly where the leak's coming from. But maybe start with doing a transmission service first, get the pan out of the way, and then you can kind of see where else it might be coming from. Certainly here, though, this output shaft seal. His rear engine mounts, we're just starting to crack up here. I don't think they're of concern yet. The engine mounts, just like the suspension bushings, are susceptible to oil leaks. So the more oil leaks there are, the more chance there are of ruining the mounts. Maybe a little tiny bit of separation on this rear engine mount. You know, at some point, if he's got a bit of money to burn, he might replace those before they're an issue. They look to be the original ones.
No, I replaced them.
Did you?
4 years ago.
4 years ago?
They weren't that expensive. They weren't that hard to replace.
This is kind of interesting here. We got a clear shot at one of the grounds for the engine computer. Rolls-Royce, for some reason, thought that the best place for them were right at the back of the heads where you can't get to them or see them from the top of the car. They quite often are a problem, and you'll just get a no start. There is a kit and a way to route the engine grounds back to the inside of the car using a grounding block, and that's a mod, something you can do. These ones look okay, but over time with the engine moving and oil getting on the wiring, they can break. So that's something to watch out for.
I did have a problem with the car just quitting while it was running.
Yes.
And it was the, forgive me, the
Ignition?
the ballast resistor.
Yeah.
It was shutting off the fuel pump. And
Yeah.
we just cleaned the connectors on the ballast resistor. It was so hard to get to it right here.
Actually, they've got the ground over on that side. I believe when they did away with that particular ballast, they ran the ground to the back of the A head, which is this one. Another good thing to do is to take the pads out every couple of oil changes, flat the pads over some emery paper and scuff up your rotors a little bit with some emery. It keeps the pads nice and flat, which in turn keeps your rotors nice and flat. These rotors do have a tendency to dish. The flatter you can keep the pads, the better wear and more mileage you're going to get out of your rotors. New brake hoses on the front. Gerald's put new struts on the front. So you replaced all these accumulator return hoses. Looks good. That's a fun job, I bet. Gerald's also replaced his upper control arm bushings. They're nice and new. Did you do the compliance mounts?
Yes, I did.
It looks like you've got a couple of little leaks at your power steering rack, and that might be where at the top of the spool valve here, it looks like you've got a bit of a leak. There is a seal up in there, like a plastic lip seal. It looks like that's where that leak may have been coming from when you were turning your steering there. Steering shaft, Hardy disc looks good. Again, a leak from your valve cover gaskets. Back there. Looks like you got a mineral oil leak here. I'm not really sure where that's coming from, though. It looks like it's dry here at this union. There was definitely some sitting there. valve bodies can go bad from time to time, and the valve bodies obviously control the pressure for your accumulators. If you have one of these cars and you notice like a knock, 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 knock sound, that's probably these valve bodies. Rather than buying the valve bodies and the accumulators separately, it's cheaper just to buy them all at once and replace them.
Because it's all in the labor getting it out anyway, right?
It's not just the labor, it's the actual part cost. It's much cheaper. Rather than buying them separately, it's much, much cheaper just to put new valve bodies on the car. It looks like he's got a bit of a leak coming from his front cover. There's a foam seal that runs between the upper and lower front covers. I'm guessing it's probably original. And they shrink up and go hard over time and allow oil to spray out from the timing gears on the front. At some point he's going to want to do that. The hoses look good. Have you got any questions, Joe?
Well, we'll sit down with the beer and run about the company. One thing I want to ask. Bearings, I was able to grease these.
Yes.
Talk to me about
Yes, you can. What you have to do is take the half shaft down.
So you have if you have pork.
You have to take you should really take the caliper all the way off. You'll see these bolts on the inside here. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
See with the yellow markings on them? That's what's holding the whole hub assembly to the trailing arm. You have to take the whole hub assembly out. After you take the constant velocity shafts off, you're going to notice that there's a big nut on the inside. The drive flange that drives the rear hubs is held on by a huge taper. So you need a special tool to be able to separate the taper. If you don't separate the taper, you can't get at the bearings. The bearings are obviously out of adjustment. They might need bearings. It might just need to be washed out, repacked, and put back together. The adjustment nut is actually on the opposite side. But again, you can't get at the adjustment nut until you separate that taper.
special tool. Is that a tool that I can rent from the club?
They don't do a tool rental. You're in Houston, you could ask Pete maybe what he uses. Sometimes what I usually use is a steel plate with a spacer in between the taper and the steel plate. I tighten the steel plate down to the flange, and then I take a family-sized hammer and whack the steel plate, and that's usually enough to separate the taper. There is a special tool by Rolls-Royce, and it's a long thread, and it's actually a hydraulically driven unit. You crank in the thread, it holds the drive flange, pushes against the taper, and separates it that way. But with most tapers, if you shock them, they will come loose. Anything else?
We'll drink a beer.
All right. I guess you get out from under the car.